My dear ones, welcome back to Perfect Design or Design Perfect, Practical Spirituality. I have a very, very special guest today. We have a very special guest, is Sal Rachele, a special person, and you'll understand why during this meeting, because I've decided to call him a time traveler visiting Earth. This is how I feel to call him. So the edition today is called A Meeting with a Time Traveler. So I will tell you a few words about him, but then I'll address him a very important question. First, I would like you to understand that you have in front of you a person with more than 40 years of spiritual experience. He's a channeler, a medium, he's a professor, he is a co-founder of Sananda Mystery School, he is a composer, he's creating original music, piano music, healing music, and recently, if we may say so, he founded an interesting, I would say galactic, healing therapy, timeline healing therapy. But we will find more during this meeting. Sal Rachele, welcome.
Well, it's great to be on your show.
Who are you, Sal Rachele, if I'm addressing this question to a multidimensional person, a galactic person? Who are you?
That's actually one of the best questions anybody can ask. Who are you? And who we are, and I'm referring to everyone watching as well as the two of us, we are powerful, creative, spiritual beings, no matter what. That's not negotiable. You are a powerful, creative, spiritual being, whether you believe it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you want all the responsibility or not, because it does come with some responsibility. And the word responsibility means ability to respond. So instead of reacting to the world, we respond to the world, but we come from our powerful, creative, spiritual center, which in the physical body we think of the heart and the solar plexus as being the center. And we're radiating truth and wisdom out into the world from the center of being. This is the higher self perspective. The ego is just the opposite. It's trying to get things from the world because it believes it's lacking in some way. It wants approval, attention, validation, things like that. But the higher self knows that we're one with God and that the kingdom of God is within, and therefore doesn't need approval or just permission in order to be who we are. It's like, we'll just be who we are. We're not worried about whether we get a certain approval rating or something like that. So that's a long introductory statement, but...
But you're a time traveler. I just know that. And I would ask you, why here on Earth now? What are you doing these times on Earth?
Because this is a very unique time on planet Earth. And I don't want to go into the physics of time travel and possible and probable realities very much.
Oh, we will go there a little bit, but later.
A little bit. The idea that any reality we can conceive exists on some level. It may not be a high agreement among souls on Earth. The one that everybody sort of agrees on we call the dominant timeline. And this is what's recorded in history books. Well, actually, most of what's in the history books is propaganda, but that's another story. But, the things we generally agree upon as a collective society we call the dominant timeline. But there's other timelines that are valid, real part of the time-space tapestry, as you call it.
Let's stop a little bit here, because when we talk about time, from my guide's point of view, there is no time. Actually, when you talk about eternal time, there is no time. But for us, there is time. Let's see, how would you define time in this reality? Because we have some rules here. And our
and I do have a book, The Mystery of Time,
Yes.
that talks about this very question. In fact, the whole book is about the very question.
It's great.
Yes, so we have what we call linear time, time by the calendar and the clock, and it's all relative. You take the motion of the Earth around the sun, call it a revolution year, divide the years, decades, centuries,
Yes.
millennia. That's pretty obvious. Most of us know that version of time. And then, of course, the cycles of the moon with the months, and the cycles of the day, the rotating of the Earth on its axis, one time is a day, and so on,
Yeah.
and hours, minutes, and seconds. So that is calendar time, linear time, and we've made an agreement here on Earth to live by that time. I will meet you in 5 revolutions of the
Yes.
Earth about the sun, 5 years. It's a convenient way of defining this physical presence in this physical dimension, these physical bodies that are miracles in a way, because there's trillions of cells all working together to give us an experience of this dimension of time. But who we are is beyond time, and that's where the timeless comes in. All of time exists right now in this eternal now moment. All the past, all the present, and all the future. And a simple way to visualize that is to think, when you are reminiscing about the past, or you are projecting into the future, when are you doing it?
Right now.
Right now. And it's impossible for it to not be now. Everything is now. So when you're thinking about what happened 10 revolutions ago, you're thinking about it now.
Yeah.
So now really is the only time that exists. Enlightenment is now. There's no other possible place for enlightenment to be than now. That's why I call it self-realization, because enlightenment implies that there's some goal to achieve. Oh, I'm going to reach some high state of consciousness in the future. That's kind of a trap. The only process is to realize that we are already enlightened, that we are enlightened right now, that there's a process of realizing that, becoming aware that we're already enlightened in this moment. So that's the timeless realm.
And because we were talking about time, and it's a very interesting topic, let's understand a little bit the concept of timeline. This timeline is this life that I have, that I know, right? This is the dominant one that I chose to live. So there are also other timelines, parallel.
Right, and I can use a real silly example that everybody can relate to. In the very next moment, I could choose to pick up the teacup, or I could pick up the glass, I could pick it up, set it back down, or I could take a drink, or I could look at this beautiful crystal ball. There's nearly a million things I could do just right here, right now. But what actually becomes part of the linear timeline? It's what we call activating. I activate an event in the timeline by putting a lot of energy and attention into it. If I think about lifting the teacup but I don't actually do it, that becomes a possible or probable timeline.
Okay.
There's a timeline where I picked it up and drank from it, and there's a timeline where I didn't. And if I put enough energy and attention into picking it up and drinking it, that's called activating a timeline. What you put your time, energy, focus, and attention on is what becomes part of the dominant timeline. And this is not new information.
But this is related to future timeline, right?
Well, this is related, to the movement of the linear timeline, you could call it. We don't really have adequate words in any language to describe this. But the whole key, for example, right now there are a lot of souls on Earth who are activating the timeline of war because they're focusing on it. Every day they get a dose of it on the news. They want to have an enemy, whether it's Putin or Zelensky or somebody else. And so they're activating that timeline of polarity, opposition, conflict. And then there's those who are activating the timeline of peace. It's like, oh, peace begins with me. I have to clear my own subconscious mind of all the warring thoughts in my own consciousness that manifest as war in the outer world.
Do you have idea when we talk about collective changes, is there any percentage necessary to make the change, to create the shift?
Excellent question, and it's a complicated question for the following reasons. Not everybody is at the same level of creative power.
Yes.
I say, oh, we're all creative, powerful, spiritual beings, but if we don't recognize that, or if we believe we're powerless, we'll experience powerlessness because of the power of our belief.
Yes.
So there's a lot of souls out there who believe they don't make a difference. I'm just one little cog in the wheel. I'm,
yes, yes.
you know, one little rat in the maze, trying to get through the Romanian highways without getting, you know, hit by another driver. And they don't believe that they have the power to change the world. And yet we know that each one of us has the power to change the world. I mean, look at Einstein, Tesla, Mother Teresa, Gandhi. I mean, these are names everybody recognizes because of the impact that they made on the dominant timeline. So yes, we can activate a timeline of peace. We can activate a timeline of unconditional love. And those are the really nice timelines to activate. It's still part of this dimension of duality, the Lila, the Maya, the illusion, the play, whatever you want to call this, these lower dimensions. It's still part of that. It's, you're not up into the timeless realm. You're down here on earth being an actor on the stage of life. But you can create a really nice play, a very beautiful, happy play in the realms of duality.
People are more and more open to the idea of working with the future, a future self, or future timeline. I am here in point zero and I intend to do something. I don't know what is the best way to do something. So I may have a few future timelines, right? Possibilities. How can I choose the best one? Can you help us?
Let's talk about that. We have it in timeline healing training. We have a technique called future timeline linking, and this is where you meet your future self, whichever future self you choose. Now, you may have a future self that's a dancer, you may have a future self that's a painter, you may have a future self that's a spaceship operator, you know.
Okay.
And all of these are real future selves. They exist in the fabric of time and space. And again, you're going to activate one, but in this case, you're going to make a link to that future self. So let's say that your future self is to be a timeline healer, for example.
Okay.
So you go into the future and you meet that future self that already is a timeline healer, and you establish a connection with that version of yourself. And it's called creating a time loop. You actually go on the fast side of the loop. Let's say it's 5 years from now, and you do a meditation that takes 10 minutes. And so in 10 minutes, you go 5 years into the future and meet your future self. Then you come back to the so-called present self. And then for the next 5 years of linear time, you work your way to that future self. And the future self becomes a spirit guide to you, guiding you. Okay,
to reach that point.
What did you do when you got to this juncture in the road? Which path did you take? And the future self will say, oh, I took this path. And so your future self is guiding you to that point in the linear timeline that corresponds to that point in the possible future. And I realize this is a little hard for our intellectual minds to grasp. It's been proven in a laboratory that you can go forward or backward in time with subatomic particles anyway. And people think, well, how is that possible that the particle knows in advance what's going to happen, you know, things like that. But it's been proven in the laboratories. So we appear to be going from past to present to future, but there's other levels of the tapestry.
But what if I don't know what I want to do in the future? So maybe I have many possibilities, and there are people asking themselves, what is my mission? What should I do? Then how can I connect with the future self if I don't know the objective, the target I have?
Excellent question. So what happens is you have this part of you that we call the higher self.
Yes.
We have 12 levels of being in my book, Soul Integration. I go into detail on these 12 levels. The 6 higher levels are outside of the Maya, the Lila, the illusion, the duality, and they can see that it's like they're looking down at past, present, and future from their vantage point up here. Again, up here is just a convention of the mind, you know, or in here is another convention of the mind. So the higher self knows in advance what's going to happen, to some degree, within the realm of free will. See, this is where it gets complicated.
I will ask you about this.
Yeah, this gets complicated because we have free will and predestiny existing simultaneously on this planet. And in this particular universe, it's a combination of God's will and personal will, if you want to think of it that way.
Yes.
So our higher self knows in advance what is the highest option for us, what we call the optimum timeline, the timeline that brings the greatest soul growth, happiness, and well-being.
Okay.
So that you think of that as soul growth,
like
it's
a
learning
straight
experiences,
way.
soul lessons, happiness, joy, bliss, and then well-being, which includes safety and taking care of the physical body when you're here on earth and things like that. So the higher self can see what your highest possible purpose is. So the real issue is, how do I listen to the higher self instead of the ego, which has no clue?
How do I make the difference between messages from the higher self and messages from egos?
Exactly.
Ego.
And of course the answer is, as I said before, higher self lives from the inside out and ego lives from the outside in. And every time you have a desire or a motivation to do something, ask yourself, is this coming from God within, wanting to express in the world, or is it coming from the ego, wanting to get things and take things because it's so insecure and afraid it doesn't have enough money or enough love or enough attention or whatever? So that's the first step, to ask, what is the motivation behind this desire? Oh, a person grows up, wants to be a doctor. Oh, yeah, I want to be a doctor. Well, why do you want to be a doctor? And you start going within and you realize that your parents were doctors and they want you to make money and be successful the way they define success. And maybe you want to be an artist. So you're already conditioned to create a future self as a doctor, but it may not be your true purpose. And so you're kind of like stuck in the ego, and your higher self says, no, you're going to be one of the world's best visionary artists, you know.
So you're asking your higher self, what is the optimum timeline for me? Okay?
Exactly. And then ask for a sign or a signal in the body. Like, for example, a warm flash through the heart area might be a yes answer, you're on the right path. A cold shiver down the spine might be, no, you're not on the right path. That's not the direction your higher self wants you to go in, you know. So you can actually ask for signals. It doesn't have to be this mysterious thing where, oh, the higher self, it's up there, out there somewhere, you know. It's with us right now. And I don't even like to say it's within, because if you cut open the body looking for the inner self, you're not going to find it. And there's no actual proof that there's a world out there. It sure looks like there is. Our senses tell us there is, but there's not an actual way to prove that there's a world out there apart from our own consciousness.
Wow. This is very interesting, but you know, there is a challenge here, because our mind is tricking. What if I receive an information from my higher self about my mission, let's say, and the mind says no, is resisting? How do I make the difference between just resisting, because this is a plane of resistance, versus it's not my way, really not my way?
This is where meditation and
the body
timeline
says, no,
healing
it's not the way.
come in. Meditation and timeline healing are very important because if you go deep into a theta brainwave state, which we do in timeline healing, you actually, it becomes easier to know what's really right for you and what your resistance is and all of that. If you try to make decisions from the surface level, the beta brainwave state, you're going to run into ego resistance, and the ego's going to trick you into taking a path that's not really right for you because maybe it's insecure. Oh, I need lots of money to pay my bills, so I have to be a doctor, or whatever it is. And so you have to really go deep, and that's why we have techniques like timeline healing and theta healing and past life regression, hypnotherapy, the Silva method. These are the techniques that are similar in some ways to timeline healing. And they're all designed to go to a deep level, a theta brainwave level.
Yes.
And from that theta brainwave level, it's much easier to hear the voice of higher self and to know what is your true calling. So that's a central reason why we have these techniques, because the world is full of distractions. And if you don't meditate or breathe or do yoga or do something to kind of back off from the world, you're going to be tossed this way and that way, like a boat in a storm without a rudder.
I wanted to ask you something. Maybe it will sound strange. Can somebody else change your timeline? I've heard about civilizations which are trying to manipulate, changing timelines, people to other people. Is that possible? Or?
Well, yes, it is, and you introduced me as a time traveler, and I think this
Yes.
is where that becomes relevant. There is a collective belief on Earth that our timeline has been hijacked by so-called negative entities. And there's some validity to that if you look at it from what I would call an intermediate perspective, not up here where it's eternal love, and
Yes.
not down here where we're little miserable pawns in some power
Yes.
elite's chess game. Those are kind of the extremes. This is kind of in the middle somewhere where people realize, okay, we do have some choices in this world, and we can become aware of some of the subtle things that are going on behind the scenes. You know, maybe there's extraterrestrials controlling some of the so-called world leaders, for example, you know, and people can become aware of those levels, which are valid at those levels. And so but it's an interesting interplay, again, between free will and predestiny or predeterminism, whatever you want to call it. And because this is so-called free will universe, we get to choose how we experience reality.
Yes.
Not necessarily changing reality. This is where, you know, programs like The Secret and, you know, your thoughts create your reality, where that's not entirely true. There's a level of truth there, but it's not like the last word, because first of all, you have collective beliefs, which are generally more powerful than individual beliefs.
Yes.
So you could believe in peace, but if the whole world wants war, you're probably going to experience war, you know. So there's that level, especially. So it is a combination of many levels and dimensions that are interacting with each other, which are creating this. So getting back to the time travel, you've heard of the Mandela effect. And most of the Mandela effect is not real, first of all. People do have faulty memories. They remember things differently from the way they happened in the linear timeline.
Yes.
And there's a lot of brainwashing and propaganda out there. Mandela, everybody thought he died in prison in the 90s, but that was fake news, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. And he didn't die till the 2000s. And why they chose to do that propaganda, well, that's for somebody to figure out, I guess. But there is some small percentage which are authentic Mandela effects, where it really looks like somebody did get in and changed the timeline, whether they were extraterrestrials, reptilians from Orion, or Dracos, or whoever they were. And in timeline healing, we're taught by my guides, the Arcturians, that you cannot violate free will and you cannot create time paradoxes. Everybody knows about time paradoxes. The grandfather paradox in physics. You go back in time and accidentally kill your grandfather.
So you kill yourself.
But that means that you were never born. And if you were never born, you couldn't have gone back and killed him in the first place. So that paradox is resolved by the creation of new timelines. Every time you travel through time, you create a new timeline based on whatever you did.
So you don't change that timeline. You just create a new...
You create a new timeline which interacts with the original timeline. And if the interaction is strong enough, you can have Mandela effects. And I'll give you an example of an authentic Mandela effect. There's a phrase that everybody remembers from the Bible, the lion shall lie down with the lamb. Funny thing is, that expression doesn't show up in any Bible, in any language, in any interpretation, any decoding of the ancient Aramaic or Hebrew. It's just gone. That expression does not exist in any of the Bibles on earth. How can that be? We all remember it. So that's a real Mandela effect. And there's others. Some people say after John Kennedy, the President of the United States in 1963 was assassinated, that the dark forces took over and hijacked the timeline, and we've had all these problems ever since, and there may be a little bit of validity to that. But
let's say I'm on my path with a great mission to help people, and someone is trying to stop me and to create deviations from my line. Mm-hmm. Can I sense this somehow? Are there any signs when this happens?
Sure. Yeah, the more you become aware of your levels and dimensions, the more you become aware of other levels and dimensions which may be influencing you. Most of us are heavily influenced. I mean, look at the commercials on television. We're constantly told we're not good enough unless we have the right brand of toothpaste, the right brand of perfume, the right car, the right house, the right husband or wife, etc., etc. You know, this whole consumer-oriented society that we're not good enough. We need more, 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 more. And we have billionaires out there in the world who aren't satisfied with billions. They need more, 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 you know. And so we're heavily programmed to not accept ourselves the way we are. And that's really the first step. If we can't accept ourselves the way we are, then we cannot create true change. We cannot change this world if we're angrily fighting against everything that's going on in this world. Bless you.
Thank you. Talking about high timelines.
Yeah, but seriously, yeah, it's difficult to be a powerful, positive force in the world if we're fighting and resisting what is. And I know that sounds like a paradox. We have to first accept things the way they are before we can change them. And maybe we are here to change things. Maybe that's a big part of our purpose. You know, a lot of the souls coming in now are called star seeds. They're from other places. They've come here specifically to help humanity. They don't need to be here. They volunteered.
Yes.
And they're here to
help us
lift humanity out of the muck and the mire. And whether they're time travelers or whether they just come from a planet such as the Arcturus system, they haven't had war in 400 million years in Arcturus. That's how more evolved they are than human beings on Earth. Imagine that, right?
Let's go also a little bit in the past. How can I work with my past? Because there is a word saying that you cannot change the past. What is done is done.
Yeah, and that, of course, is not correct, as we know here, but most people don't realize that. So, in timeline healing, we go back to the traumas that have taken place in the past. And we give a healing to those traumas, and it changes who we are in the present when we go back into the past and make a change. And so, for example, maybe you were beaten by your father when you were 5 years old. And you grew up hating men as a result. This is an example we use a lot in timeline healing. And then you go back and you give a healing to your 5-year-old self. Now you've jumped into a new timeline. And let me explain how that works. when you think about what life was like when you were 5 years old, in the original timeline, your father beat you, nobody came to your rescue, and now I can't stand to be around aggressive men or whatever. Now you've gone back and done the healing. Every time you think about your past, you remember this beautiful, wonderful healing you got. And it was just, you know, now it's like, oh, I don't have that same trauma anymore because I remember this wonderful healing that happened when my father was beating me, and now I've forgiven him, I've forgiven myself, and so on and so forth. So you have a new timeline. The old one still exists, by the way.
Okay, so you don't change the...
The other one's still there. There's still a version of the Akashic records where your father beat you and nobody came to your rescue. But your timeline you've chosen to jump into includes that healing you received at 5 years old. And this is different than the psychological technique of reframing, where you trick your subconscious mind into believing things happened differently than the way they actually happened. That's a powerful technique, not as powerful as timeline healing in my humble opinion, but it's used a lot when you don't have time to go back and really work through your subconscious mind and you just want a quick fix. Oh, I'll just pretend I had a happy childhood and then I'll face this challenge with a smile on my face. You know, and it works to some degree because the subconscious mind is very subjective. You know, it's very receptive to being convinced of things. You had a happy childhood, subconscious mind. Okay, boss.
But at some point...
At some point you still need to heal it. It's not healed. You've covered it over with a plastic smiley face in order to get through some difficult period in your life, and maybe that was a beneficial thing at the time, but it's not healed. You haven't really gone in and forgiven yourself, forgiven the other person or persons involved in the trauma, and that's done in techniques like timeline healing.
Okay. Why should we, or how can we use in a practical way, let's say, timelines? How can we bring something here now from past, from future, from multidimensionality?
Yes,
what
there's
can we do
another
more
technique
than that?
called reverse timeline healing, where instead of going back to traumas, you go back to peak experiences, highlights instead of lowlights.
Okay.
And there's one technique that's offered in the second level of timeline healing where we connect with powerful versions of ourselves from past lives. So let's say you were a high priestess in Egypt 5,000 years ago. You would go back and you would link to that high priestess and download her knowledge and wisdom into your present self in order to deal with issues you have in your present life from a high priestess perspective. So there's a technique where we do that. There's another technique where we tap into the minds of enlightened souls and we download that enlightenment and wisdom from those souls. Often at the peak of enlightenment, we go in and do that work. So yeah, time and space are malleable, meaning that they can be changed and fashioned and molded in different ways. It's a living, breathing tapestry of time and space. And so we can go anywhere in that tapestry and experience what is taking place there. I didn't say what took place or what will take place, what is taking place there. Right now, there's a timeline where you're being beaten by your father, or where you're being given an initiation as a high priestess in the temple, or whatever it is. So you can tap in the present moment, the only moment there is, to that event, which is taking place in the tapestry of time and space.
It is helpful to know the future. I mean, where would be the learning experience? Because if someone tells me, you know, you'll have a relationship, and a romantic one, but it comes with a hard lesson, maybe with some suffering, I'll say, oh, thank you, maybe next time. I'll prefer to jump over it, you know, to just skip it. So
Yes, we talk about that. In the relationship workshop that I haven't done for a while here, we actually go into how the higher self will withhold information from the lower self in cases like that. It's like, oh, higher self sees that you're going to enter into this relationship, but it's only going to last a year, and then you're going to learn everything you needed to learn from that relationship, and you're going to go be with somebody else. But if you told that to your lower self would say, why even bother if it's only going to last a year?
Yes. Yes, I've witnessed these situations when my higher self doesn't tell me many things. Even future selves tell me, you don't need to know all details.
Right.
You'll just discover step by step. All you need to know now is this one or this one. Just to be ready to make the next step, but take the next step, but not to know everything, because probably I'll say no thank you.
Let's use an analogy, or a metaphor, I guess it is, of the forest. And there's a path going through the forest, and you can only see a little ways ahead before it disappears into the forest.
Yes.
And you can only see a little ways behind you where you came from on this path. But you decide to climb the tallest tree in the forest, and from the tallest tree you can look out and see where you've been, where you're going, and all the other paths that you could take through the forest. However, you may see parts of the forest you have no desire to experience. So you might say, okay, well, there's a path over there, but I choose not that one. It leads to
so this is free will.
To a sewage pile or something, you know. And this one over here leads to a beautiful flower garden. I think I'll take this one over here. So yeah, there's still choice at a certain level.
But within the forest.
Within the array of time-space tapestry, there's choice.
You cannot get out of.
As A Course in Miracles says, you don't have the free will to change the curriculum, but you can elect what you want to take at any given time from the cosmic classroom. Okay. And so a lot of souls are choosing, I want to learn about war. I'm going to come to a planet where there's wars going on, and I'm going to be a soldier, and I'm going to be on the battlefield, or whatever. And okay, there's the path to war over here on this part of the tapestry. Dive into a body in the middle of Iraq or Syria or now Ukraine, you know.
Because we don't have too much time left, I would like to touch a little bit channeling. Because from my point of view, channeling is the next level for our race. Is part of our evolution. We'll discover ourselves more and more in our multidimensionality. So this intuitive communication will become more and more natural. From your point of view or from your experience, how do you know when you're in a real connection or not? Are there any signs, at least at the beginning, when you don't have so much experience? Which were your signs that you are there?
Okay, and that of course lead us right into the little mini channeling to kind of close off everything. Nice. So I'll bring in my guides, the founders. So this is one of the things that my guides they consider very important, that you use discernment anytime you're receiving messages, whether they're coming from your subconscious, your superconscious, your higher self, spirit guides, or quote, directly from God, unquote. Really put it to the test. Is this information practical? Is it something a higher being would actually be likely to say? And if you investigate, you'll find out real quickly, does it have judgment in it? Are they talking down to those poor miserable souls down there on earth? Forget that. That's not a higher being. Higher beings look across to us because they see our magnificence. And so they're going to see us as equals to them. And even the founders who are from level 12 see us as equals. Oh, creator gods in training. Okay, still in training, but still you're equal to us. We're both created in the image and likeness of God. God didn't say, well, okay, God said, and it was good. He saw it as good. He didn't say he saw this as better than that.
So you're channeling messages from the founders. Please give us few words about the founders, and
Okay.
then I will invite you if they would be here.
Yeah, the founders are 12th dimensional beings of pure light. They look to me like bright blue-white stars. They've never had a physical form. And they were involved in the engineering of the human DNA many millions of years ago. The Homo sapiens form of DNA actually came from the Pleiades about 100 million years ago. But the humanoid form itself began in the Lyra-Vega system about 900 million years ago,
Yes.
before the stars in the Pleiades were even fully formed.
Yes.
And then after they cooled enough, they migrated some of their people to Pleiades. This is in the earlier books. You can
Yes.
read about the history of the Earth.
What would be the most important thing they would consider to?
Well, let's ask them. Let me go ahead and share space. My own higher self and the founders are going to share space, and they're going to speak using we and us, because they are a
And they will
collective
have
consciousness.
another around 4 minutes, because I know they can
They
put
can
everything.
manipulate time, but
Yes.
we'll see what they can do in about
Okay.
4 minutes. So, greetings, dear creators. We are the founders. It is our pleasure and privilege to be with you. We understand we only have about 4 of your minutes to present what we wish to present to you, which is basically just to introduce ourselves and to let you know, yes, absolutely, you are one with us and you are equal to us. So let that sink in for a minute. Take some deep breaths. Breathing is one of the secrets of life. You might say, well, of course, everybody breathes, but conscious breathing. You can become more aware of yourself as infinite energy beings when you breathe and meditate. And so let us all breathe and meditate, who's watching this program, and just take in the infinite energy of the cosmos. You are one with God. That is not just pretty language, a high idea that you are entertaining. No, it is the truth. It is who you are. You are the infinite, expressing through an individual human form, but there is no separation. If you could see astrally, all of your bodies are linked with energetic fibers. Everything in the universe is linked together energetically. There is no separation. And if you could just get that one idea, there is no separation, then you would be well on your way to realizing what we have realized in our dimension. So the only difference between you and our group is that you have not fully realized who you are yet. That's really probably what we should leave this with, is that thought. But we are very grateful to be here. He says we have a minute left. So let's manipulate time a little bit, and let's see if we can stretch this minute into a few hours or days or weeks. So just go ahead and realize you can do that. So just take a moment to be in this moment and stretch this moment as far as you want to stretch it, and just see what it feels like to stretch this moment, to do what's called time expansion. Natural harmonic time expansion makes a moment bigger. Natural harmonic time compression compresses time, so it's like it's sped up, it moves more quickly. A lot of you experienced that around 2012, where it seemed like time was speeding up. So take a moment to just be who you really are. You are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. So we are the founders. It has been our absolute pleasure and privilege to spend just a few moments with you. Many blessings.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Sal. And promise me you'll come back.
We should probably mention that we're doing timeline healing trainings in Brasov.
Yes, but people will see this in December, so we are waiting for you next year.
Absolutely.
With many classes, trainings, because I think it's important for our evolution to open more and more to our multidimensionality, say, through healing. And what you're bringing is of high, great value. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I invite everyone to read your books because they are like treasures. I loved to receive answers for my experiences through your books. So
and these are 4 of them. There's
only 4 of the 7.
Yeah.
Yes. I will present the link of your website for people to have more and more information and news about your activity.
And we'll have a 2023 schedule ready for you. And
so we are waiting for you back, and also back in Romania, but also to Design
this is
Perfect.
maybe 6th or 7th time I've been to Romania. So
But you'll keep coming.
We took a couple years off for this little COVID nonsense that took place.
But you'll come back anyway. So thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, and see you soon.